Yo, what is going on, everyone? I'm back with another review video. It is going to be on my Lamzu Atlantis. Easily, like, my most hyped mouse, honestly, since seeing it on Twitter. It has been an absolute blast using this mouse. Thank you so much to Lamzu for sending it out for review. And I will also be making a very short comparison to the XM1 a little bit later. Obviously, that is probably the closest shape that the Atlantis gets to in terms of, like, perfect claw grip mouse. But I did make a very lengthy first impressions. I think I talked a little bit more in that one than I will be talking about in this one in the comparison part. But first off, I want to talk about these switches. They're using Huano 80 million pink dot switches. I think it's a very, very long title, but these are easily the best switches I've ever felt in a mouse. The XM1 actually still held the title for my favorite switches ever because even after around a year and a half of very heavy use, they still have not creaked. They still feel just as snappy as day one. And no mouse has really had that kind of longevity for me at the very least, other than like Razer Opticals, like their new ones, like in the Viper V2. But these switches are so ridiculously nice and tactile. They still feel like day one. The only thing is there's very, very small amount of pre-travel. It's like almost impossible to like genuinely show, but there is no pre-travel, and I really, really like switches that have little to no pre-travel. Speaking of switches, these side buttons, you can probably hear it from my mic picking it up, although it's like very far. These are like the nicest sounding switches I've ever heard. Although in all my reviews I say I do not use side switches as much as most people, these are so ridiculously nice to use. The only thing is there is a lot of post travel. You can really push the switch into the shell, although there is very little pre-travel. I guess the post-travel just kind of adds that like confirmation that you are pressing it in. I'm not too sure why there's so much post-travel, but the little bit of pre-travel is really, really nice. Another thing, the scroll wheel feels so good. This is probably one of my favorite scroll wheels. It's a lot like Extrafy, actually, unlike the M42, where it's very, very soft, but you can still feel the defined steps. And then it's very hard to see on my shitty camera. There's a little bit of groove in the scroll wheel itself, so it feels really, really nice to touch it. The click in is honestly pretty heavy. I definitely feel like it could be a little bit lighter because even for me, I feel like it's a little bit more difficult to press in. Final mouse is probably like the lightest like middle click I've ever felt, but this is definitely a little bit heavier than the average. Next, the feet. I do actually have a good bit to say about the feet design overall. While I didn't notice anything wrong with it, there is a modder that wants to send me a mouse, and he actually said that because the back flare is so big and the skates are so small, it actually wobbles a little bit side to side. He presses into the pad though, or she. I never asked, but the modder actually presses a really, really hard into his pad to get more stopping power. I do not do that anymore. I have just found how to control my mouse just a little bit better. Not saying that people that press into the pad don't have control. I just learned to stop doing that. I feel like it caused a little bit of inconsistency for myself personally. And these sides, he actually put like two little strips of like core pad skates on right here and right here. And he said that eliminated the side to side wobble. Like I said, I haven't noticed it. If you are not a heavy-handed user, I don't think you will notice it either. But if you do tend to sink into your pad a lot more, or if you have just a softer pad that you feel like is going to sink in no matter what, then maybe do that also. It's like a little bit of a vertical strip here and here. Although talking about the feet quality, I think these are probably the best stock feet experience I have felt in a very, very long time. I do actually feel like they are probably right in the middle ballpark of Tiger Ice feet and BTL skates because I feel like the low initial friction and the very, very silky cloud-like glide is really Tiger Ice-like, but the stopping power is still really good on these skates. Granted, I am using a control pad, the Camtech, which is next for review. But even then, even on something like my Raiden, it was really easy to come to a full stop with this mouse. Things like my Vancer Ice Pad, my Sarah Pad, the original one, not the Kin. All of these speed pads that have technically lower stopping power than most other pads, I do feel like it was very, very easy to stop with this mouse. The sensor is a 3389. More companies are finally able to actually put that sensor in their mice. And I do feel like it's really good. I feel like it's only a slight step above a 3370. I think it's very, very difficult to notice better sensors, in my opinion, but I am able to notice that there is a very, very slight improvement with my smoothness for tracking scenarios. Like I did just say, it's not that big of a difference, but if you want the competitive edge, like just something that is going to make you maybe a little bit easier on the mind too. Your psyche takes a lot into how you aim, honestly. So if you do want that ease of mind, knowing that you have the best sensor, it is going to be really good. Although I do feel like a 3370 is perfectly fine too, but you are getting a top of the line sensor at only $80, which is pretty insane for everything else that's in this mouse. Talking about the weight, I have noticed for myself, weight overtakes shape in my opinion. Only for me. I think shape is still king for a lot of people, but for myself personally, I feel like weight is the most important thing for me. And the two mice that really made me realize that is the Viper V2 and the Starlight Small. And these two shapes, you could probably ask any claw gripper, and I feel like that you're gonna say that they hate this shape. I very, very much dislike the Viper V2 shape, but the weight and the clicks, everything about this mouse other than the shape is just so perfect to me. And I feel like that's just a Razer thing at this point to not make the perfect shape, but just have perfect everything else, which is really funny. Even for the coating, I did have the grips on during my review, and I've noticed that I can just get used to the raw PBT coating now. It's a little bit more difficult, but on the side here, I just pull it in a lot more to firmly plant it. Oh, firmly grasp it. Fucking SpongeBob fans are gonna go crazy. But I'm able to firmly plant it in my palm for really, really stable grip and really good control. The Starlight Small also, I feel like, is incredibly small. I feel like I have very small hands. I'm really unsure at this point because a lot of people that, especially reviewers that I've talked to, they have very similar hand sizes. I am 19 by 11 to 12 centimeter hands. I have very wide hands, but I feel like my hands are slightly short. Maybe I've just met huge-handed people in my life, but I feel like my hands are pretty small. And even for like the small Starlight, although it's like probably like it's just unbelievably good how amazing this mouse is, I do feel like the shape is the only thing that really holds it back. But I'm able to notice that I can still perform well because of the lightweight. And it is the exact same thing with the Lamzu, although I do feel like it is slightly bulky in the back. That is the biggest difference between this mouse and the XM1 is the XM1's back hump is not as filling in the palm. So I don't feel like you're really going to be able to micro adjust unless you're really good doing like motions like this mid-fight. I feel like for myself, at the very least, that's very difficult for me. So although it is difficult for me, it's very, very easy to track with this mouse. I don't use an arm sleeve anymore, but it's so easy and effortless to start and stop this mouse because the fact that it's 55 grams, which is insane. A big factor is going to be the bottom plate. At the very least, they made it very aesthetically pleasing. I'm just glad they didn't do a pulsar move and just rip out the bottom and just make it look kind of mid. At the very least, they made this beautiful design on the bottom, so it's very aesthetically pleasing all around the mouse, honestly. Very, very tasteful coloring, tasteful branding. I like where it's placed also, the Lamzu name. I feel like everything about this mouse is just so pleasing to the eye. On to the comparison, just in terms of shape, because it's the XM1, as much as I love this mouse to death, it is easily like one of my favorite mice of all time. It is ridiculously outdated. I do feel like 70 grams is a little bit on the heavier side for the mice that have come out recently. Razer Viper V2, their Death Adder 3, they're able to make this big-ass ergo, but only weighs 63 grams. It's just a really outdated mouse, in my opinion. The sensor's a 3370. People are still using that. I feel like the Kale switches, while I am a huge Kale lover, I have tons of I've seen so many people, especially in DMs, that tell me that their Kale 8.0s have started double-clicking, which is really surprising. Out of all the switches I've tried, only Omron 50 mils have been the only switch that have actually double-clicked for me. On the original, or I guess on the XM1 V2, the white one that I got, that was the one that had 50 mils. My G Pro never double-clicked, which was kind of surprising. My other friend had a G Pro and his double-clicked, but my Kale 8.0s have never once double-clicked. So I'm really surprised to see that people actually have that issue with Kale switches. So I am glad that Lamzu decided to go a completely different route. I think Quanos are kind of like the GOAT right now. I do feel like Kale is kind of losing its allure to me. I feel like the more mice that I use Huano switches in, Vaxi and Lamzu specifically, I just love that switch a lot more than my KO 8.0s now. But other than the weight, I feel like the XM1 really loses me because of the width. Even though I have pretty wide hands, I do feel like this mouse just is a little bit too wide. It kind of forces my hand to be a little bit more open, which is more uncomfortable for me just because I like thinner mice. I love the ZA13 and the Lamzu, which I do feel are slightly on the more narrow side towards the indentation. And I really feel like that is the only thing that holds the XM1 shape back for me personally. because after trying the Lamzu, I actually like how less filling this hump is in my palm, mainly because I feel like I'm able to relax it just a bit more in my palm area, not on like my fingers. These muscles on the side of my hand are very, very tense when using the XM1 because of the width. Although it is thinner and I would have to squeeze it a little bit more harder, I think the back hump actually makes my palm feel a little bit more relaxed, even though I'm gripping it more. It's a very difficult thing and a really new thing for me to experience, so please bear with me on that. But I just love this mouse. Everything from the switches to the feet to the weight to the shape, everything is amazing. The battery life, I have used this mouse, I've left it on for extended periods of time, and it took about 3 weeks for it to like flash red, actually. And I charged it in a couple hours, and it's been fine ever since. Another thing that you would really want to do is you really want their software. It is set to 12 milliseconds debounce. I'm very unsure why companies keep doing that. Maybe it's a way to push the program usage. It's just kind of weird that it's always set to 12 milliseconds delay. I definitely was like really confused when I first got it because the software came out, I think, like 2 to 3 days after I received my mouse, which is like maybe 3 to 4 days for a lot of other reviewers. So that is like the biggest thing, is I would definitely suggest getting their software. It's just going to be so much easier for you, less of a hassle. Set it to 0 milliseconds or 2 milliseconds. I have heard 0 seconds causes double clicking. I'm not too sure how they feel or how they would be on Huano. I don't really go below 2. If someone that is more experienced in the science behind that, please leave a comment telling me that it really doesn't matter. If I can use 0 milliseconds, then I absolutely will. Please, just somebody more knowledgeable, let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's pretty much all for the review. I absolutely love this mouse. It is probably my main for a while. Maybe the GWO's 4K could beat it. The Death Adder V3 I'm getting today, I'm so excited for that. Boardsy and Crafty made me ridiculously hyped for that mouse. I really need to stop watching them because every time they compliment a mouse, I just want to buy it immediately because their opinions are just so goated. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments about this mouse, I will be answering the comments below. And Lamzu, honestly, they're ridiculously kind in DMs, and they give a shit about tons of people's opinion. They have talked to a lot of people, not just reviewers, other company owners, people from the community. So if you have a question, you can even go to them in their DMs for their questions and help. I think they're a very kind company. I've learned more about their life than I did about the mouse in DMs. But yeah, that's pretty much all for the review, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
50.
Hit him again. Oh shit. That break ball did.
He probably healed. I think he healed. Oh, he's on you. Nice.
Hit him once. Amazing, by the way.
Let's go. Nice.